Welcome to the Nick Haleris Show. This is the place where we explore big ideas with people having a big impact on our world. I'm your host, Nick Haleris, serial entrepreneur, author, early morning riser, and seeker of truth and wisdom. Join me as we explore the journeys and discoveries of fascinating people who are literally unlocking the secrets to creating a life of both success and fulfillment. Each episode will arm you with insights, ideas, and practical perspectives on what it takes not only to be financially and personally successful, but also how to start having authentic impact on the world around you. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the show. Our guest this week is Lauren Meister, my neighbor and friend, and the first elected official to appear on the show. She's a current city council member serving her third and final term, and a two-time former mayor of the city of West Hollywood. Lauren is someone I see just about every day. As she's walking her beloved dogs through the neighborhood, I'm usually headed out the door to pick up my kids from school. And in these daily moments, we've managed to become good friends. I wanted to have Lauren on the show to highlight her inspiring story and showcase her commitment to practical progressive politics. West Hollywood is this little 1.9 square mile place, just one of LA County's 88 cities, and it's situated right in the heart of LA. Even though small, with only 35,000 or so citizens, WeHo packs a big punch when it comes to culture and political influence. As you'll hear in this episode, Lauren is someone who didn't set out to become a politician, but became one almost by accident, by taking responsibility for her community and standing up for what she believed in and cared about it. In other words, she answered the call to service. What I respect and admire so much about Lauren is her fierce commitment to practical and independent politics. While she and I don't agree on everything, I know when I talk with her that what's behind her position is serious independent thought and not just the borrowed views of the party or what's politically convenient by the standards of the day. This is a quality that is so very rare, especially in the rough and tumble world of municipal politics. In this engaging conversation, we get into the debates around police and public safety, housing and homelessness, state interference with local control over zoning, and much, much more. As always, thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoy. Hey guys, this is Nick. I wanted to take a quick break from the episode to share some exciting news. In addition to the podcast, I want to make you aware of some additional content we're putting out. And best of all, it's 100% free. Our Profit Plus newsletter consists of weekly insights about what it takes to find meaning in the pursuit of modern success. This is the place where we explore big ideas at the intersection of markets, business, politics, and life, as we seek to empower our readers to have an authentic impact on the world. If you're serious about finding fulfillment amid success, then definitely check out these additional insights. Just go to subscribe.nickhaleris.com. Again, that's subscribe.nickhaleris.com. Now let's get back to the episode. Well, welcome everybody back to the Nick Haleris Show. Today we have a special guest. It's my neighbor and a three-time city council member for the city of West Hollywood, the small town that we live in, which is probably needs some explanation during the course of this conversation because, you know, for outsiders, we're inside of Los Angeles, but we have our own sort of politics, and a two-time mayor and a fun person. So Lauren, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Nick.
Yeah, I've been thinking about having this conversation ever since the idea of the podcast came up, just because we have the same schedule. I see you pretty much every day on my way to pick up my son from preschool. You're usually walking
the dogs.
The two dogs, yeah. So you've been top of mind, and thanks for taking the time.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Cool. I figure we could start in with a fun topic, because I feel like you have one of the most interesting origin stories for an American politician, you know, coming from sort of a neighborhood or a captain, a night watch neighborhood captain, to winning a seat in a very competitive town. Even though West Hollywood is small, like politically, it kind of like punches way above its weight, you know, and it's such a fascinating rise. So let's talk about that for a bit.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. You know, I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. I never expected that I would be a council member for any city, let alone the great city of West Hollywood. I had lived in West Hollywood as a renter for about 8 years. Then I moved out for a couple of years. Then I came back. I bought my house. So I started getting involved with neighborhood activities. I became a neighborhood watch captain, which actually is someone who just hands out newsletters. I started going to meetings. Some of them were a little crazy, but my friends who lived in the neighborhood said, "Lauren, you have to go. You just have to continue going. It's very important. You've invested a lot of money, into the neighborhood, and now you need to be part of it." So I kept going to meetings, and I started going to council meetings and planning commission meetings, and then one day, one of my neighbors said, "Look, we're fighting some development. They want to take down some eightplexes and just put up a parking lot, and we need you to speak at the planning commission meeting." And I was like, I have to speak in front of people, but I went and I spoke, and I was a nervous wreck. Then some development was going to be happening in our neighborhood, and so I put together like 75 people to show up at the meeting, and they were shocked. They literally had 10 chairs. So I realized that I had a little talent for communicating to people. And when the opportunity came that they were looking for a new president on the board of the West Hollywood West Residents Association, I ran. I got elected. So we have about 1,000 households in our neighborhood that's called West Hollywood West. And then I really got involved with everything having to do with the city. I attended every planning commission meeting. I attended public safety commission meetings, city council meetings, and ended up getting appointed to the public safety commission. Then I got appointed to the planning commission. I ran for city council 3 times. The third time was a charm. Finally got elected in 2015, and then got reelected in 2019, and then 2022. So it really did. The journey really started in the neighborhood.
Let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsor. This episode of The Nick Halera Show is brought to you by Metros Capital. If you're an investor looking for direct access to real estate investments, then we'd love to talk with you. Investment opportunities at Metros Capital balance financial returns and community impact. To learn more, contact us at metros.nickhaleris.com. Again, that's metros.nickhaleris.com. Now let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, and going back to that, like when you first bought the house and were in the neighborhood, like what motivated you to get involved in the neighborhood watch? Was there crime an issue, or what was the genesis of that?
Yeah, it was more. It was a residents association that looked at everything. It wasn't only about public safety, but it was about parking issues. It was about traffic issues and development issues. And so really it was just about, you make this investment by moving into a neighborhood, and you want to look out for it. And I happen to be good at communicating with public officials that were there at the time about our issues. I got to know everyone at City Hall. It was like Cheers, everyone knew my name. Yep. And so because I went to all those meetings about our issues, I learned about everybody's issues. And I also learned that, most residents had the same concerns. They had concerns about, not being able to find a parking space at night. They had concerns about cars cutting through the neighborhoods because they couldn't get through on Beverly or on Santa Monica Boulevard or on Sunset. They had concerns about public safety, obviously. So with Neighborhood Watch, you had meetings with our local sheriff's department and our fire department and our code compliance department. And when things would happen, people would call me and they say, "Lauren, can you call code compliance for me?" And I was like, "Okay, I guess I'll do that." And that's how I got involved.
That's interesting. So you were like a natural leader for the neighborhood. Essentially, you ended up being the voice of everybody. I
don't know how natural it was, but yes, it was definitely something that I kind of fell into, but really enjoyed, and it was a very enriching experience for me, and that's why I had decided to run for city council. My mom always said, if you don't like the way, someone's doing something, do it yourself, right? Yeah. So I felt that I could be more effective making changes from the inside. And that's why I ran.
You mentioned your mom. Did you have like experiences growing up that prepared you for this? Like, how do you think this happened in your life? Like, what circumstances came together that made you interested to do this? And then once you got into it, so good at it?
Honestly, I don't think I had any experiences that prepared me for this. I think literally it was just feeling a part of a neighborhood and a city. I think West Hollywood, because it's only, 1.9 square miles, it's very easy to get to know neighborhoods. It's very easy to get to know businesses and people. And the government is so accessible. I mean, you just, you're a couple of blocks. I could walk to City Hall, which is a very different experience from living in New York. It's a very different experience from living in the city of LA. So although we are surrounded by the city of LA, we are our own city and we make our own decisions. And so it was just a very manageable situation.
Yeah. And West Hollywood has been a city since like the early 80s or something like that?
Yeah, 1984 was when the city incorporated.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were unincorporated part of the county of LA, and the LGBTQ community, tenants, and seniors all got together and said, we don't like the way the county is running West Hollywood, so we want to form a city. And together they were able to do it.
Yeah. And what year did you move into the city?
I moved in actually in 1985. And like I said, I was renting a place in the Tri-West area with my sister. And then I moved to the WeHo Heights or Sunset Heights area. I lived on Clark Street for a number of years. And then I started my own business, so I needed a bigger place and ended up moving to the Valley, right before the earthquake. Then the earthquake hit and I had to move out of there. So lived in a couple of places until I found my way back to the city of West Hollywood in 1998 and have been in the same house ever since then.
Nice. And so when you moved back, that was 98. When's the first time you ran for office? It was only a few years later, right?
Right.
This all happened fast for you.
Yeah, it was 2003. It was the first time I ran. Then 2009, I felt every 6 years whether I needed it or not, right? 2015. And then in 2015, it was just, the stars were aligned and everything kind of made sense. And by then I had made a name for myself because I had literally at every planning commission meeting, every city council meeting where we used to have a lot of people show up for meetings. There was always something for me to talk about. And I got very interested in planning and land use issues. So if there was a controversial, project, I tended to speak on it. And residents liked what they heard. So they remembered my name. And finally, by 2015, they said, okay, let's give her a chance.
Give her a chance. And then 3 times in a row, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. And the last election, 2022, I had 53% more votes than the person who came in second. So it was definitely, people saying we definitely want to keep her back in.
Yeah. And if I was doing a little research in prep for this conversation, you were one of the big voices pushing for term limits. Yes,
I was actually chair of the committee. And we did get term limits, so this will be my third and final term.
Yeah.
And the initiative won by over 60% of the votes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that idea is something that probably needs to be looked at the national level.
Yes, I agree with you. And it's interesting because when we were pursuing the term limits initiative, one of the big research firms had done a survey about term limits for Congress, and over 60% of the nation wanted, of the people that were surveyed across the nation wanted term limits, whether they were Democrats or Republicans or otherwise.
Yeah.
For Congress.
Yep.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I think it's very important. Like my idea that I've been floating in my head, like if I could wish this into existence, you'd have term limits for both House and Senate, but you'd also raise the pay to where it was competitive with like the most competitive jobs out there in the world. So law firm salaries or big banking salaries, so that you could really attract people to try to run for these seats. And it doesn't have to, the term limits could be meaningful. They could be 3 terms or something for Congress or for Senate, and maybe 5 terms for Congress or something, so that if somebody wins, they can at least be there for a period. But you raise the salary, you have some term limits, and then maybe the crop of people running for office gets more interesting over time.
Yeah, I think the requirements, the standards need to be a little higher for people running for office. We see what's there now, and it's a little bit scary. I think also there needs to be more education for people who want to run for elected office, because they're not getting mentored. And the problem is then you have someone who's in office for so long, and then when they're finally out, then someone comes in who has absolutely, no experience or very little experience. So, people who don't like term limits, the answer for them is always, well, it's about experience, which I agree. It's very important to have some level of experience. And I think it's also important to have some institutional knowledge. So, to have at least a few people who have that institutional knowledge, and along with the new people, because otherwise who's going to say, we tried that 4 years ago and it didn't work. And maybe this is why it didn't work. And so we can do something a little bit different.
Yep.
But it seems to me that especially at the national level, you don't see that mentorship, and even on the local level, you don't see it, and then it's reflected in the people who are elected.
Yeah,
the new people who are elected.
Yeah, you can at the local level. I feel like you see it. It's true at all levels, but you really see it writ large at the local level. And in our town, not West Hollywood, not our official town, but our broader town, there's a lot of corruption. There's people going to jail. LA City Council members, several
Right.
of them going to jail.
Yes.
County supervisors may or may not be going to jail. And you've got people getting in trouble for crazy racist comments that get recorded. Like, this is like a crazy environment to be a political leader. West Hollywood doesn't have anyone going to jail, right? In their short history.
God, I hope not.
Yeah.
No,
I'm trying to think. Like, none of the council members that I've ever heard of have gotten in hot water.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in LA, they
Yes.
definitely are.
Yeah. Well, and there are a lot more, I would assume there are a lot more temptations there.
Yeah.
Right?
But the money's the same. Like, to win the seat in West Hollywood which only has 36,000 residents, and it took 6,000 votes or something for you to win your seat by a 50% margin.
Right.
You still have to raise a ton of money, right? It's no joke.
Yeah. Well, in 2015 and in 2019, when I did win, I had raised over $50,000. Before that, I had raised like in the 20s. And I was running against people who were raising $100,000 and $200,000 just for that one local race, for 36,000 people. So, basically when I went to run in 2015, I got a campaign manager. He said, this is the budget. You need to raise $50,000. I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? I couldn't do it before, but I did it. And he was right. Because the way we spent that money, you need to have, mailers and signs and, different kinds of things to get your message out. And in 2019, I also raised about $55,000. This time, because the election, remember, we used to be on a March schedule. So this is the first time that I was in a race where it was a November election, which means a lot more people voting because this was the midterms. And so it's not just a local election, it's county, it's state, it's federal, everybody's running, except for president. And so I had to raise over $90,000 for this race. But still, other people raised, over $100,000, and there were independent expenditures that were done that raised, also $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 supporting or opposing people. There was a whole thing against me. They spent something like $50,000, $60,000
on the independent expenditure committee. Interesting. Yeah, and if you look at the city at large, like the broader LA area, city council seats are like a couple million or something now to win, right? Like you need to raise a ton. And in WeHo, now in your short time, 3 consecutive terms, it literally sounds like it went from 20,000 to 100,000. That's a humongous percentage, right? It's like 5x.
Yeah.
And I feel like I have some friends who won races for Congress, for example, and that's like millions.
Right.
It's really a hard proposition, and the minimums are low. The idea that you could raise millions of dollars on these, $1,000 minimums or whatever they are depends on the state, I guess. But
yeah, well, for our city, the limit for contribution is $1,000, and it used to be $500. And that changed a couple of years ago. I actually opposed the change. I thought that it was important that we keep it at 500, but it makes it
the ante just keeps
going up,
going up and up and up. It's kind of crazy,
especially when you think about it's definitely a 24/7 part-time job.
Yeah,
and we get paid $17,000 a year, something like that, plus benefits. So you also have to be working a day job, I say that in quotes, because how else do you afford to live? It's kind of a shame that we're limited that way, but it's state law because we're a general law city. So
yeah, and so all the while that you've been engaged as a civic leader for several decades now, you've been working. Full time, an entrepreneur. Actually, you have your own firm. So tell me a little.
Market research. Yeah. I started market research in 1982, and I started my company in 1991. Basically, I was an independent market research professional that worked mostly for other research firms who didn't have someone who did what I did on their staff, or they didn't want to have to grow their staff, so they would use me for work that was their that they had that they couldn't do internally. And I did really well for a long time. And with COVID, the COVID shutdown, basically because I worked a lot in qualitative research, everything kind of came to a standstill with the shutdown. So I ended up going back to school to get my master's degree in public administration with a concentration in emergency services management. And now I'm trying to figure out what to do with my life because I really love what I do as a council member, as a public servant. And I feel like I could really be an asset in that way. And I just want to do something meaningful. And at this point, after spending so many years doing market research, for companies and, for ad agencies and marketing firms and market research firms, I'm kind of like, okay, I'm ready for plan B or C, whatever it is at this point.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So do you think plan B or C involves running for a different office? Or is it more getting involved in leading a large government organization, or what do you think?
Well, I think it's probably not running for a different office because, to be honest, I've never really thought of myself as a politician. I've considered myself someone who's, a member of the community who's been able to take a leadership role. So I don't like politics particularly, and I definitely, running for office is not easy. And in fact, last year when I was running, I was, mayor and I was running for office and I was going to school, and it was a lot. I see myself using my education and my market research experience, my ability to look at data, analyze data, and my experience as a council member, understanding local government, understanding the needs of, local, not only, what happens at City Hall, but, really what happens on the streets. I'm very much you got to fill those potholes I believe that should be our priority, is basically customer service. And our clients, our customers, are our residents, and they are our businesses. So I have always focused on our residents and the neighborhoods to make sure that quality of life is our number one, priority, and public safety is our priority. And with businesses, I tend to focus on small businesses, because I think that it is our small businesses that make the city of West Hollywood unique. You know, the big businesses, they're all over the place and they can take care of themselves. I'm more concerned about us keeping that small town feel by having those small businesses succeed.
Yeah, and there's some really, really cool ones that have their origins in and around West Hollywood.
Absolutely.
Like right by where we live on Melrose, like cool coffee shops, but all throughout the 1.9 square miles, there's a bunch of these that people love to go to. Tourists come to West Hollywood to go to these places.
Yes. Well, we are definitely tourism is very important to us. As you know from our budget, our transit occupancy tax, or TOT, is 22% of our revenue. And that's why when COVID hit, it was such a scary time for us, because people were not traveling, and they certainly weren't, going to have, fun at a hotel. So there were a lot of hotels that were, basically, shut down. And, as a city, we did what we could to try to help businesses keep their doors open, but it wasn't easy. And that's why it's so important that another area that I'm very interested in is resilience. And so resilience in terms of emergency preparedness, resilience in terms of climate, but also resilience in terms of being able to bounce back after disruption, whether it be an earthquake or whether it be COVID or another pandemic.
Yep. Or the uprising, the 2020, like there's
civic uprising, absolutely. I mean, all of those things are what they call in resilience shocks and stressors, and some are known to us and some aren't. So the known ones, we put in a hazard mitigation plan when we're doing our emergency preparedness planning that is required, by the state and by FEMA. If you want to receive any kind of grants for hazard mitigation, you have to do this plan, and those are the ones we know. And then we have to figure out, if it happens, how do we? Well, first you want to figure out how do you prevent it, and if you can't prevent it, how do you mitigate? And then if beyond that, you have to be prepared for response and recovery. And so recovery businesses. It's called business continuity planning. A lot of small businesses don't do that. And it's really, really important. I did a little presentation for our West Hollywood Chamber of Commerce a couple of months ago, just to give them an idea of, these are the types of things you could be doing to be prepared. Whether it be, again, the next pandemic or, a windstorm that blows out your electricity or an earthquake. And people have to think about things like that. That's why insurance is so important as well. Making sure that you have maybe a line of credit at the bank, things like that, to things that you don't think about, but you really should be thinking about if something bad were to happen.
Yeah, for sure. It's important stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, this topic reminds me of a point that I wanted to make in this conversation. I feel like one of my hypotheses behind this whole podcast is that there is a huge audience for this sort of middle practical ground. And one of the things I appreciate about you and your leadership of this town is that you're kind of hard to pin down. So, and what I mean by that is there are issues where, you might fall in the camps of the liberals, for example, which is common in this town. But there's a bunch of them where you don't really fall in that camp. So fiscal responsibility, public safety, practical focus on things like this that don't even make it on the radar of most local politicians. And you've been successful. And I feel like that is like a great sign for my hypothesis that there is a audience for someone who's focused, leaders who are focused on these things that like actually matter for the lives of people in the community rather than these bigger issues or whatever that local politicians tend to get into.
Yeah, well, I don't look at things. Look, I'm a liberal Democrat. I've been a Democrat my whole life. But when I look at issues, I don't look at them in terms of party. I look at them in terms of what is the best thing we can do for our constituents. And then you look at competing interests. Sometimes it's, residents and businesses may not agree on something. So you have to figure out, okay, if it's something that you can come up with something middle ground that either everybody's happy or nobody's happy. Isn't that what the old expression? If you've done a good job, if everyone's happy or nobody's happy, you've found that middle ground. That's how I tend to operate. And I'd rather compromise and get something than not compromise and get nothing. So if I have certain goals, like I told you before, I have a big focus on land use and planning and making sure that our neighborhoods, that we maintain the unique character of our neighborhoods. And so, I've been able to navigate to finally get to a point where I was able to pass, certain legislation that will be beneficial for those neighborhoods, in the long term. Again, I look at it in terms of our residents, and I don't look at our residents. I don't segment our residents. They're our residents. That's it.
Yeah, and I have a funny example of how committed you are to that idea. So this was probably 3 or 4 months ago. I don't know if you remember this, but we were meeting at the West Hollywood Park, which is a beautiful park. And we were talking, I don't even remember, I think we were talking about maybe this podcast or something. And a resident came up with an emergency. And the emergency that this resident had was that there were people who were bringing their large dogs into the small dog park.
Yeah.
And you handled it like such a pro. You said, okay, let me go look at the situation. And you listened to the residents' complaints and you came up with an idea about how to adjust the signage. But I thought that was funny and a good like anecdote for West Hollywood, right? Like West Hollywood has a lot of issues like any place, but it's also like kind of a cool place. And so people's concern for what's going on in the day, it ranges from, okay, someone's homeless on the street to there are large dogs in the small dog park.
Right.
And you have to deal with all of it, right?
Exactly. Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Well, those are the kinds of problems they're a lot easier than, than obviously the homeless situation. That's, obviously a regional and statewide problem and probably national problem. Those are the ones. Those are actually the kinds of complaints you like to get because they're easier to fix.
You can solve them by like adjusting
Yeah.
the signage. Whatever happened? Did you end up?
Well, we actually, the city attorney had to look at some language, and once that's done, then we can put up some signage.
Okay.
But yeah, we're allowed to do it, so we just have to do it.
Yeah,
that's it.
That's
And having 2
interesting.
dogs myself, I totally understand
Yeah.
the situation.
Yeah, like West Hollywood is a big dog town.
Yes.
For 1.9 square miles. There's a lot of dogs. It I don't know what the concentration is. That might be an interesting piece of data.
Yes, it would be.
Yeah, like how that compares to the number of kids. Although I've noticed, I don't know if you've noticed this, you've lived in the neighborhood for a while. I feel like there's more families, there's more kids around. But maybe that's just because I have kids and I pay more attention to that stuff.
Yes, I think the census data has not shown it as a growing, substantially.
Yep.
Still like under 8% or something,
Okay.
people with families. But I see it also. So
maybe like it feels more, but it's statistically, yeah, interesting. Well, maybe it'd be fun to talk about some of the big issues that
sure.
you are leading on and dealing with as a city council and a 2-time mayor. What years were you mayor of WeHo?
2016/17, and then 2021, 22.
Okay.
I had 13 months starting April 2016 to May 2017, and then 16 months in 2021 to 22, because we were trying to catch up to the November election.
Yep.
So
one
got a couple of extra months in there.
Yeah, and so one golden period where like the economy was roaring, and then one coming out of COVID. And,
yes.
Yeah. So two different, very different.
Yes,
times.
very different experiences, especially in 21. I got sworn in on Zoom. It wasn't very fun. It was hard to, as mayor, you basically, lead the meetings, right? You have to, call on people, and you have to deal with staff at the same time, and the city clerk and the public, and getting your colleagues to just do the raise hand on Zoom was a challenge. I mean, so I was happy to go back in person. It was much more manageable in person.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Yeah, Zoom is good for some things, but managing a public forum is not quite there yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so maybe we'll just go through them one by one. Like,
sure.
Big issue coming out of COVID, or in this town, but all towns probably, is public safety.
Yes.
And it's like in the news every day. And something I noticed in the neighborhood is that there's sort of this debate ever since the George Floyd murder around, what do we do with the sheriff versus, maybe some alternative policing methodologies like the security ambassadors. And there's strong opinions on both sides of this, but where do you stand on it?
Well, I believe that we need our sheriffs. I think that sworn personnel can handle things that civilian personnel cannot handle. We did increase what we call the security ambassadors, which, basically puts more eyes on the street. They talk to people. They can, walk you to your car if you'd like them to. But basically, if something is going on, they need to call the sheriffs. I believe that our sheriffs and all policing need reform, and they need to improve. I think training needs to be improved. If you look at other countries, the amount of education and training that they have is way more than policing in general in this country have. But I don't think you throw out the baby with the bathwater. I think you work to improve them. And we went through a time where we had a sheriff of the LA County sheriff who was, not very popular, and he wasn't very good, and he wasn't very effective, at least in my opinion. And I think that a lot of people used him as an excuse to say we need to get rid of sheriff's deputies. Because now we have a new sheriff in town, Sheriff Luna, and he's has a totally different approach, and he's much more approachable, and he's reasonable, and he wants to improve training and all of that. And so now we have a different situation where we can actually work with our sheriffs to make a better situation for everyone. But I do think that we had I think it was 62 sheriff deputies, sworn personnel before the COVID shutdown. It went down. I wanted to bring it back up. I had 3 colleagues who did not want to, and actually wanted to cut the number of deputies that we had. And it really created a big divide in our community. Although I do think that the majority of our community members wanted to increase the sheriff's department. Plus, we had a new sheriff's captain, a new captain of our sheriff's station here in West Hollywood. And I felt that we need to give him all the resources we can for him to succeed. You don't have someone new going in and then say, oh, we're going to cut your budget or we're going to, cut this or cut that. I had colleagues who played with words and said, well, we didn't cut the budget. We didn't cut the public safety budget. That's true. We spent 22 million, something like that on public safety, and we still spend that much money. But cutting deputies means you're cutting people who could be out in the field. And again, you're taking away resources that we had an increase, for example, in residential burglaries these last 6 months. Is it helpful to have guys on bikes riding through and just sort of riding through? Well, it's nice. It's nice to see them, but if they don't recognize where there's a problem and can actually deal with it without having to make a phone call, you lose time when you have someone who has to first call the sheriffs when they see a problem. I'd rather it be a sheriff's deputy who can deal with the problem right then and there.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like what we've seen in the post-COVID era, or even during COVID, but there's like a brazen disregard for the law. Remember all those smash and grab, all this stuff. So if you have people who are willing to engage in that kind of behavior, you do need armed, sworn, trained personnel. A person who's like just on his or her bike as an extra set of eyes isn't going to be useful at all if the people engaging in criminal activity have that mindset.
Right.
They don't even care that the police are there half the time. They're just going in and just breaking glass. Yeah, I fall in the camp that I do agree with you. I think there's a humongous silent majority. I don't know what percentage it is, but everybody wants more police presence.
Look, everyone wants to be able to feel safe.
Yeah.
When I first moved to West Hollywood, in 1985, I could walk down Sunset Boulevard, at 9, 10 o'clock at night and not even think twice about it. I don't know that that's, for me personally, that I would do that now. The same thing in our neighborhood. I think in general, the world has become less safe. We have more guns on the street than ever. We look at reports that come out from the sheriffs, and they'll have something about they had a traffic stop, and then it'll be like guns in the car. This is the reality. This is our reality now, and so you can't expect unarmed ambassadors to deal with people who have guns. You just can't. It's not fair to them. It's not fair to have that expectation that that's going to be the thing that, that's going to protect us. It's not. The truth of the matter is, it's the sheriff. It's the sheriffs or LA, whoever, the police that can handle those kinds of issues. We had numbers. We had our public safety directors, meeting, where at our last meeting where they explained, how the numbers have changed the last 6 months. And in general, our what they call Part 1 crimes and Part 2 crimes have come down a little bit. So our Part 1 crimes came down 9%. But if you look at the numbers, you also see that our residential burglaries increased by almost 32%. So I try to look at the numbers and say, okay, what would be the best way to deal with that particular type of crime? And the same goes for Part 2 crimes. That went down like 2%. However, narcotics-related arrests increased within that. So you have to look at the actual numbers to know how do you deal with that. So to me, if instead of saying let's increase the security ambassadors, maybe we have to get armed patrol, and maybe an armed patrol that just rides through the neighborhoods, would be something in between. So maybe it wouldn't be as expensive as having sheriffs, but they might be much more effective than security ambassadors on bikes.
Yep.
If you have a lot of drug-related incidents, especially among our homeless population, because there are substance abuse problems with our homeless, and there's also mental health issues, then maybe instead of increasing our security ambassadors, you bring on another MET team, which is a team of LA County. It's a deputy and a mental health professional who can do evaluations and can decide if they need to do where they put them for 24-hour observation or 72-hour observation. I think you have to look at the numbers and then say, okay, maybe this is what we need to do. Don't just make a general statement. Let's increase them, security ambassadors to 25 to 30, 50, 80, 90, because at some point it's not effective. If the types of crimes you're seeing in your city are not, someone just hanging out, then, it's not going to be effective.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, like the security ambassadors provide a useful service.
Absolutely.
But for stopping a crime like burglary, which is premeditated and planned, they have no chance to do anything. Even if they came across it, they would just be making the same phone call that an ordinary citizen would make.
That's
They'd
absolutely
call 911 and then...
Right. They would be calling the sheriffs. And something we talked about last Monday night at our council meeting is, basically our captain said, if we see that there's a rise in certain kinds of crimes, then we do specialized, tasks that actually focus on that neighborhood, where we watch it and we can actually catch them. So if it's a group that's going around burglarizing residences on this street or that street, then they can focus on that. But if they don't have enough deputies, they can't do that.
Because they're doing patrols or trying to do the patrols with fewer people.
Right.
Yeah. So where did the city end up on this? Are we back to, what was it you said, 62?
No, we're back. We're at 61. We increased the sworn personnel as sergeant, and we added a sergeant and we added a deputy. And we left it open to add another deputy in December, once we look at the numbers. And we also added 2 non-sworn, so 2 civilian personnel that they could get as a PIO, public information officer, and also a community liaison. Because our community, as you know, we're very active and engaged, and we want to know what's going on. So we want to be able to look at Twitter and say, okay, why is that helicopter over my house?
Yep.
Or why did I just hear 8 million sirens going down Santa Monica Boulevard? So hopefully those positions will increase community engagement so people know what's going on in the city.
I think it's a good idea because I feel that people are relying on like the Citizen app. And there's another one that I forget the name of it. But the problem with those
they're not always accurate.
They're not accurate, and they're full of like racist commentary. It's not really a good tool for the city. So I do think good information would be helpful. And my wife and I have that conversation every time one of the helicopters, they're either going to Cedars, which is fine, they're doing a medical thing, or there's like a police standoff somewhere. And usually it's in LA. I mean, the thing about West Hollywood is LA is on all sides of us, essentially. I guess maybe Beverly Hills is on one side, but it's still, LA is all around us. And so you do see a lot of LAPD activity as well.
You do, and a lot of helicopter activity.
Yeah. I feel like it's calmed down. There was a period after the 2020 stuff that it was all the time. It felt unsafe in our neighborhood. I don't feel that way anymore, but there was that moment in time where it was real iffy out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically for, my opinion is that, the number one priority of government should be the safety of the public. And so for me, public safety issues are really, important and should be the top priority of council.
Yeah, I agree, especially local, because what percentage of the budget is it? Like 30% or something like that?
It's 22%.
Yeah, big percent.
Yeah.
So that maybe the next topic we should talk about is homelessness, because it's a very related topic.
Yes.
Every day I go to the gym on La Cienega and Melrose, and I leave the house at like 5:45, and I encounter at least 5 homeless people in that walk, and they're the same people.
Right.
And that's just one little half a mile walk.
Right.
It's a big deal. And you've probably been, aware of this, working on it for 20 years, but I don't know where to start on it. I guess maybe just give us your thoughts on how you think it's going, what we should do.
Yeah, I mean, I walk every morning as well. And so I know I see what you're seeing. It's a very complex issue because, first of all, if somebody doesn't want help and they're not doing anything illegal, then you can't force them to go to take services. We actually have a very robust plan that we work on. We have outreach people that go out every day to talk to homeless people, to try to make a connection and build a relationship of trust, to try to get them to go to shelter or to get mental health care. So we have that. We also have hours in front of our library where we say you want to come for help, come here and we'll give you information about services. We will give you the resources to get help. Again, it's very complex. So obviously, I mean, for me, there are homeless people and there are transients who are there's criminal intent. It's two different things, and it is very difficult to make that separation. But what is truly sad is the fact that people who really need help, people who have mental health issues or substance misuse issues, we have a very difficult time getting them off the street. And a lot of them are just afraid to go to shelter. They're afraid because, maybe they have a pet and they don't know what's going to happen to them. Or maybe they had a bad experience where they were, beat up at the shelter by somebody else who was there. So I think it's extremely important that the Measure H money that the county has been getting for the last 5 years should have been used to build mental health facilities for people who have mental health issues and substance abuse issues. And that we should have been able to bring people to those places so that they could get the help that they need, that they don't know that they need. That's like the biggest problem, right? Because we don't have conservatorship. So the state laws are very, are very strict about that. Like a city can't just say, okay, we want to send this person in. It takes a lot. I've had to do it once where I had to sign my name to something.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's a lot. It takes a lot of staff time, and and you don't always get approval to do it. And then again, they may be in for a week, and that's it. And then you see them back again.
And they come back to the same place.
In the same place, and they're in the same behavior. So it is very difficult. We are actually converting an old motel. I don't know if you know about this, the Holloway Motel. Holloway Motel had been around for a very long time. Very sketchy people, I will say, staying at that motel. And it wasn't taken care of. It's very run down. So they closed during COVID. And so the city said, here's an opportunity. Maybe they want to, sell. And so we were able to purchase the motel. We were able to get state funds to rehab it. And so we will be rehabbing the, I think it's, I don't know if it's 22, 24 rooms that they have now. We'll be rehabbing them to like 22 rooms plus management facilities as bridge housing. So not as a shelter where people will line up and say, can I stay here tonight? It will be people who have agreed that they want permanent housing, and it'll be transitional housing for them. They'll be there maybe 30 to 90 days, and it'll be a place where we can provide professional services to them so that they can, get their Medicare or get their, Social Security, get their driver's license, maybe get employment training, to be able to get them prepared to go back into, society and get into permanent housing. But even then, that permanent housing for many of these people needs to have wraparound services. And by that, I mean services that will help them if they have mental health issues. Maybe they're not serious enough where they need daily, somebody living with them, but that, they need to have somebody on site that can help them navigate the system.
Yep.
And that's what's been most difficult is having those types of facilities built. And to be honest, I don't think LA County has done a very good job with Measure H money. They've built up an even bigger bureaucracy. And like the last thing you need when you're dealing with homeless issues is more bureaucracy. And I think that's something that at least Mayor Bass recognizes from the city of LA. And one of the first things she did when she got into office was say, okay, we're going to get these people off the street. And that's an important move to say, let's put the bureaucratic stuff, aside and actually focus on the people.
Yeah.
And that's really the biggest challenge.
Yeah, I'm so encouraged by that move as well. It's funny, or not funny, but interesting. Like our first guest actually on the show is another civic leader, Miguel Santana, and he was talking about how he's one of the most connected people in the entire city, and he had a situation where a homeless person sort of fell down in front of his house, and so he and his wife started to care for this person, and he talked about in the episode how it took a year or something to get any help for this person. He had to go to the bank with her and do this and get all this paperwork. But it's to your point about the bureaucracy and the layers and layers of stupid stuff when you have a person who's dying on the street, essentially, who needs immediate attention from medical professionals or whatever. It's sad that we have a system that's designed that way.
It's complicated because people have rights, right? So you have, which is extremely important, is civil rights. And but is it humane to let people stay on the street, where they're, they can't take care of themselves, they're hungry, they're filthy, they're, have substance issues or mental health issues? That to me is not, that's not a humane response. And, at some point you probably have to say, look, that's not I understand they don't want to move, but they need to move. We need to, help them. Yep. So it's a tough one.
It's a tough one. And this is a kind of a controversial question, but I want to get your take on it. I do a lot of work in the city of Los Angeles on homelessness. And one of the narratives that I hear a lot is that cities like West Hollywood and Beverly Hills and Santa Monica, so it's not just picking on West Hollywood, but all of these sort of affluent cities within the bigger city of LA footprint, they deal with homelessness by shuffling off homeless into the boundaries of the city of LA. And that's how, you get a situation where West Hollywood doesn't have as much visible street homelessness as, say, across the street, across La Cienega in LA. What do you say to that narrative?
Say that's, that's BS. We actually, a lot of the homeless people that come into our city because they feel safe in our city, whereas they don't feel safe in the city of LA, so they come to our city. I think the difference is that LA, it has more, like they have more visible signs. So they have tents. They have, as they have these tent cities. You go down Sunset, all of a sudden you're out of West Hollywood and there are tents all down Sunset, and you're like, what is going on here? It's like a third world country. So, I think it's all how you deal with it. We've taken an approach that is, very compassionate, and we really try to to convince people who are on the streets that their lives would be better if they were off the streets, and we have resources for that. And we spend millions of dollars on these resources, and we're talking about maybe a couple of hundred homeless people. I mean, counts, vary. They do the annual count, and I don't believe the count anyway because, it's only who you see. It's not who you don't see. And that there are people who are hidden. One time we had a study session at one of our council meetings with LA County, and I said, our count was, I don't know, at the time it was like 100 something, and the county's count was like 55,000, and I said, so is that realistic? Is that a realistic count? Oh no, it's probably 3 times that. So, all I can say is that I know that we don't do that. We try to get people help. And again, people feel very safe in our city on the streets, so that's why they tend to come to West Hollywood and not stay in Hollywood.
Yeah. There's a huge difference. The encampments that popped up in and around on the other side of the street, which actually Mayor Bass just cleared the one on San Vicente, which had gotten big.
Yes,
really big.
They had a barbecue there and everything.
Yeah, a TV. Yeah,
it was crazy. I know.
Wild.
It was right across from Cedars, right?
Yeah. It's fascinating. I mean,
Yeah,
it's really complicated. That, by the way, that narrative is widely held. I'm sure you know that. That narrative is like very commonly talked about. The one I just described about, West Hollywood and Beverly Hills, they just pushed the homeless into LA. Everyone believes that.
Well,
yeah.
I don't believe it.
Yeah. No, I had never asked you that question, so I was curious to get, because you would be one of the people setting the policy. You couldn't set that policy anyway without a scandal. First of all, yeah.
No, we don't. Yeah, we spend a lot of money on outreach. From we use Essentia, Step Up, the LA LGBT Center. We have beds at the LA LGBT Center and Essentia. We're trying to do this again, in the most compassionate way we can, which is to help people. We have Tarzana, this organization that deals with substance abuse. We said, do you want to go to rehab? Even if someone is arrested, and if the deputies see that they have a substance abuse issue, they actually bring in the people from this organization to see if they want to have rehab. So we do what we can to help people.
Yeah, but the law, as you mentioned earlier, the law has really gone pretty far in the direction of preventing government from interfering with people's lives. So it was a reaction against an old system, which was very corrupt, like sending people to asylums and all this crazy stuff. They had to fix it. But now it's gone so far in the other direction where someone could literally be killing themselves slowly over time on the street and the government can't do anything about it.
Right.
And that's the tragedy here, is that the law is hamstrung well-intentioned people from doing what needs to be done.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah. Crazy stuff. How many units is that Holloway place going to be?
I think it's about 22 units. It'll be, rehabbed so that, because I'm sure it hasn't been rehabbed in many, many years. And we are also going to rehab the billboard that it's a non-conforming billboard. Let's put it this way: if they couldn't put a billboard there now, but it's been there for probably pre-cityhood, and so we're going to let them fix that billboard up, and we will get revenue from that billboard as well to help run the program. So,
okay, and provide money for the services and
Right.
whatnot. The service people that work for the city of West Hollywood that you mentioned, are those coming directly out of your budget, or is that from the Measure H money?
Oh, that's from our general fund budget.
Okay, so you have your own teams. not the county
Yeah,
teams.
I mean, I'm sure we get money from we get some money from the county, but it's not significant.
Yeah.
And then we get grants, but again, that's not going to pay for a whole program. We've always spent, somewhere in the neighborhood of, 6 to 8 million on social services, and it has increased over the years to deal with the homeless situation, and so that's it's coming from our general fund.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. I'm totally agree with you, by the way, on the count. The count is absolutely crazy. It's 1 or 2 days in like February or January.
January, yeah.
And they go through this city. Like, how many square miles is LA County? I don't even
Right.
know. And they have this army of people who there's no quality control check between,
Right.
one group of people. There's two people in a car or something. They go and drive a neighborhood. The odds that they're getting this right is like 0, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, and I think there was a big article in the LA Times about that.
Yeah.
No, I think it was Rand actually that came out with something that said that it wasn't, that it couldn't be correct. So,
Impossible to be statistically like a valid number.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
But we just have to do with what we see. So
Yeah.
that's what we do. And then the other thing that the city has done, especially during COVID, but we've always had this in place, is rental assistance to try to keep people from becoming homeless, because a lot of times someone is, one paycheck away from being homeless. So especially during COVID, we had a very robust program of rental assistance. We did get that, we're getting some of that money back with with the federal monies that have been coming in. But that's an important issue. And so for me, a lot of it also is planning, because if we allow developments to demolish housing that is affordable, and all we're getting back is a few affordable units in return and getting mostly market rate, we're not helping this situation. We're just not. And the state has taken, a lot of our control away from us regarding local issues, local planning issues.
Yep.
And my opinion is that cities know their own cities best, and you should leave it up to the cities. And if you want to have requirements like RENA, then put down those requirements, but then don't micromanage how the city gets there. And my feeling is that incentives should be going to nonprofit housing providers that are providing housing that is affordable. And incentives should not be going to for-profit developers that are, providing a couple of affordable units and then able to build, 30% more density or even more, which is, something that changes our neighborhoods to just get those few affordable units. It doesn't make any sense to me. We used to actually, West Hollywood has an inclusionary housing policy that now it's been basically overridden by the state laws, but we were getting 20% affordable units without having to give away incentives and bonuses. That was it. You wanted to build in West Hollywood, you had to provide 20% affordable units if you were building something over 10 units. And if it was under, then you gave money to our housing trust fund.
Is that still in place, that measure, or was it overruled by like SB 1818?
It's basically it's overridden by the state law.
Yeah.
The state law prevails.
I'm glad you brought this up, because literally this was going to be my next question, because I feel like something that's happening in our state, it's been happening for years in our state, but it's starting to happen in other states as well, is this battle between the state governments and the local governments around the issue of zoning and around this issue of housing affordability. And West Hollywood, in my view, is kind of a unique situation because it's only 1.9 square miles. So what can West Hollywood really do to improve the affordability of Los Angeles? It's a
Right.
question, right? Like,
Right.
it's hard to say, but it's getting the energy around this is getting more and more intense, and there's more and more state proposals to usurp the power of local control,
Right.
and it sounds like you're firmly in the camp of
Local control.
let's not
That's
do
why
that.
I got elected.
Yeah,
And if you're an elected if you're a local elected and you aren't thinking, that the state should not be taking away your powers, then you shouldn't run for office. That's your responsibility. That's why your residents voted for you. Was to have that decision-making power, whether they agree with you or not on all of your decisions. But at least it should be among the local officials. And I think part of the problem is there have been some bad players, some cities that are bad players when it comes to affordable housing. And maybe they require more supervision or something. But, you don't penalize the ones that have been providing affordable housing for all these years. And also, now you limit our creativity because you say, for example, that design is subjective. So you cannot have any subjective reason for denying a housing project. So what are we going to end up looking like? What is this state going to look like in 20 years? People came to this state because it was so attractive and there was so much potential. And I just really wonder what's going to happen to us. I think that again, West Hollywood has always done it right. But look at the state. The state has, a Democratic majority, yet we can't get a reform to Costa-Hawkins. We can't get the Ellis Act overturned. Why is that? We can't get make short-term rentals illegal. Why do they think we have a shortage of housing? We have vacancies. Short-term rental business has really done a job on our housing availability, on our rental housing availability. So for the state to not deal with it, now I understand that the cities can deal with it, but if cities have different policies, like we have a good policy, right? We say if you're in rental housing, you can't have short-term rentals, and if you're in a house, you have to host. You have to be there in order to avoid like party houses, that type of thing. But even with those strict provisions, we still have a short-term rental problem because it's very, very hard to have to make sure people are following our codes. It's hard to keep people in compliance. And then if you have the city of LA having totally different policies, which are much more lenient, then what happens? So their use of housing as hotel rooms basically affects everybody. It affects us. It affects Beverly Hills. It affects all of us. So I think that the state has to take a much, if they want to take a strong role in something, that's what they should be doing, is looking at short-term rentals. They should be looking at Costa-Hawkins and reforming that. They should be looking at the Ellis Act and either overturning it or reforming that, because keeping housing that's affordable. And I try to say that rather than saying affordable housing because, technically there's a difference. You talk about affordable housing, it means, maybe for low-income people. That's what people think of. But housing that's affordable is for, the average person to be able to have housing that's affordable. So then you get a building that has market rate and a couple of affordable units. They're charging, $3,500 for one bedroom. Then you have that old building down the street that was charging $1,500 a month for one bedroom, and then that person moves out and they can raise the rent right to market rate. Well, maybe they can't raise it to $3,500, but whereas they might have raised it to $1,600 or $1,700 before, now they're going to raise it to $2,200 because they know, well, it's still better than the $3,500 that they're getting in that new project down the street. And it's making it unaffordable for people to live in our city.
Yeah.
You can say the whole trickle down, oh yeah, the more housing we build, the better it'll be. But we're not seeing that. When we built a lot of units in the last few years in West Hollywood, we have, the Dillon and the Huxley and the Crown and all of those places. And most of those units are expensive units to live in. If I didn't buy my house in 1998, I couldn't afford to live in West Hollywood.
Yeah, it's crazy expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I don't know that those policies, I don't know that the state is actually looking at the numbers and saying, oh, we are succeeding. What are their metrics for success? How many people have been evicted and displaced? And then they find out they can't even afford anything in the city. So they either have to move to a suburb, they have to move to, some part of the county that no one wants to live in, or they have to move out of the state. And we do see that people are moving out of the state. Those are numbers that are real.
Yeah, big numbers. It was, 500,000 or something over the past 2 years?
Yeah. So it's not because it's affordable.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like the policy proposal that I have in my head, I've had for several years, is that we should drop all of this stuff that we're talking about, like all the rent control laws, all the density bonus programs, all this stuff, and just subsidize people's rent and make a subsidy program that's actually big enough to help people pay for their rent. And the market will actually take care of itself. Developers will come in and build stuff. If people have the vouchers to pay the rent, they pay the rent. I think that's a better way than this like hodgepodge of policies that we put together over a long period of time, granted. Mm-hmm. Since the 70s probably, right? Late 70s, this stuff has been happening. That we'd end up in a better place than messing around with density bonus programs, having the states fight the local governments over zoning laws, all these things. They're not going to work. There's no chance that you could build your way out of this situation with this hodgepodge of policies.
Well, and also because the policies, they're not producing what they think they're producing. That's the problem. They're
not
just
even close.
No.
Yeah, it's like we're doing the same thing over and over again and think it's almost delusional. Like, what are we doing? We're going to do another density bonus program. We're going to do another, rent control regime. And we have a historical precedent, like New York City's the extreme version of this. And New York's rents are higher than ours. They just keep going up and up and up because this stuff, for whatever reason, doesn't work. But what will work is money. But the issue that I see there is there's a reluctance in this country to address need where it is. And so instead of giving people ample vouchers who need them, low-income people who need vouchers to live somewhere, we design all this other stuff. We subsidize the developers to build affordable housing. We do X, Y, and Z, when really the person needs the money. So why don't we just give them a voucher?
So you're a guaranteed income fan.
Yeah, I don't know about a guaranteed income, but I'm in favor of providing vouchers for housing for people who live and work in the city. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when when we were working on our housing element, one of the things that I talked about is if we want to keep people in their housing, then why don't we use the money we get from our housing trust fund to make sure to keep certain units affordable? So let's say you have a landlord who's thinking about selling. We want them to stay, right? We want them to stay because, say, they have, 15 or 20 units and those units are affordable. Then say, you know what, then we'll subsidize. They're saying, well, we can't afford the maintenance or this or that. All right, we'll help you. We'll give you a no-cost loan, or we'll give you this much money as long as you keep at least this number of units affordable. And, we have a definition of what's affordable for a studio, for a 1-bedroom, for a 2-bedroom. Use that money to keep affordable housing affordable.
Yeah.
Because look, the bottom line is West Hollywood is basically built out. So the only way we're going to get new housing is to demolish the existing housing that we have. That's not helping our existing residents. That is actually doing the absolute opposite.
Yeah. I feel like now, too, with the packages of laws that have come down recently, like SB 330, which most of our audience probably this is like mumbo jumbo, but essentially SB 330 makes it very difficult to demolish a rent control building because you have to replace the units and offer the right to return. So if let's say you evicted 2 or 3 people in the process, you've got to build units to accommodate those people and give it back to them if they want it at the same rate. So from a development standpoint, what's crazy about SB 330 is like nobody did any math. So on small scale development, it's a wipeout. No one can do it because it doesn't pencil. Now maybe these bigger ones like the ones you mentioned, they can get around it because they can build a massive density bonus building and put these units in there and they can figure it out. But for like turning the state is convinced that we could fix the affordable housing problem by turning duplexes into fourplexes and all this nonsense. It's good policy in a sense. I'm not against it, but it's definitely not going to like move the needle.
No, and you're displacing people in the process.
Yeah.
And in fact, my feeling about SB 30 is it's provided the city a tool to protect rent-stabilized units that we have. So in the case of, say, a 10-unit building or less, it isn't worth it for them possibly to demolish, or a 20-unit building to demolish it and have to replace those units, right? But that's okay, because guess what? Then they shouldn't have bought the building in the first place. that building can stay a rent-stabilized building that provides units that are affordable. And I actually think that part of that bill was intended to help, because that only applies to rent-stabilized cities like the city of West Hollywood. I think that actually gives local government the tool to say, no, you know what? We don't want all of our buildings demolished. We want our rent-stabilized buildings to be protected. And we want to protect our residents. So that gives us a tool to do that. So you and I might be on different sides of that.
Yeah.
But
I think we might be on different sides, but I think we're both like aligned about the goal. So my issue with those types of laws is that they're counter narrative to the stated objective. So if you like zoom out and you look at the state is basically using all these studies that say, hey, look at the excess zoning capacity of this state.
Mm-hmm.
If everyone just maxed out their parcels, we would solve our housing crisis. And then they designed a bunch of policies to try to incentivize that. But laws like SB 330 literally destroy that. Even if that building, that 20-unit building had excess zoning capacity, double. Let's say you could double, you could go to 40. You can't pencil out. You can't pencil it. And so it's sort of counter to their original policy idea, which was like, let's get people to max out the zoning of all these parcels. Because a lot of places like we are built out in the sense that they're physically built out, but from a zoning standpoint, there's opportunity. Mm-hmm. So that's my issue with those types of laws. Yeah.
Well, and I'll go back to saying the state should get their hands off our land use policies.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Get your hands off our zoning code. That would be my answer.
Yeah. That's a fair point. Well, I want to ask one more question. I know we've taken a lot of time, but this has been super fun. So there's a phenomenon out there that I've noticed, not just in West Hollywood, but any local government that I'm engaged in, where local politicians seem to be very concerned about national issues like abortion, or even in some cases like geopolitical stances like the war in Ukraine or violence against women in Iran. And these are important topics, but they tend to take up like a disproportionate share of the airwaves in local political debate, where instead of focusing on what we've been talking about, like public safety and homelessness and housing and potholes and stuff. We're talking about stuff it's basically irrelevant. But what do you think is behind that phenomenon? Why are local politicians doing that?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think it's important, especially like in a city like West Hollywood, to have opinions. However, I don't think it should override why we were elected, which was to deal with local issues. And that means things as simple and mundane as filling potholes, planting trees, making sure our parks are safe, getting the big dogs out of the small dog park, making sure that we have the right amount of sworn officers to protect our streets, and offering, important social services to our residents in need, and making sure that our small businesses and our business community can thrive. For me, that's what local government should be about, and especially in a small town like the city of West Hollywood. It's not to say you can't have opinions and you can't make them public, but to put a lot of time and staff time and effort for those things is not necessarily fair to the people who elected you. I think that we need to focus on local, and as we've talked about before, we are very lucky to live in a liberal state like the state of California. And there are certain issues that are federal issues. There are some issues that are state level issues that have become state level issues. But we don't have to, I don't think we're at risk in our state on those issues. I don't think anyone is going to overturn, abortion laws here. Yep. So it's not to say that you can't communicate your opinion about them and about what's going on in the world, but the majority of your time and effort should be on local issues, taking care of your local community.
That is a perfect answer and a great way to end this conversation. I know you're not a big social media person, but if people were interested in following your leadership of West Hollywood, where can they find you on the internet?
Sure. I'm on Twitter, at least for now. I don't know how much longer, at Meister for WeHo, and it's the number 4. So MEISTER for WEHO. Also on, I have a Facebook account and Meister for WeHo, and it's I have the page and I have my personal Facebook page, and then Instagram. I also have Real Dogs WeHo, which is it's dedicated to the dogs of West Hollywood.
So it's like the Real Housewives of
yes,
but it's the real dog. Okay, I love that. Okay.
I haven't been very good about taking pictures lately, but I try to take pictures of different dogs that I meet on my walks.
Nice.
Who live in West Hollywood. That's Real Dogs WeHo, and that's on Instagram and I guess Facebook. And I think I got an account on Post, also Meister for WeHo, but I haven't posted anything there yet. I'm waiting to see what I'm going to end up doing with Twitter. Yep. So we'll see how that goes. There's only so many social media accounts I can
manage at one time.
Yes, and then I have my website is meisterforweho.com. Again, the number 4.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to The Nick Haleris Show. We hope you enjoyed the episode and would appreciate your help with spreading the word by sharing with your network on social. And until next time, remember, it's not about pursuing success to unlock fulfillment. It's about learning how to find fulfillment in the midst of success.